Good morning, everyone. Can you believe I managed to get Gregory Bortz, because that's how you sign off on your official documentation, known as Greg Bortz to some of his mates, to come on this morning and we're going to talk about a few things. How's it, Greg?
How's it, Joe?
Rory?
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
My late mom was the only one who called me Gregory, and she did so when she was angry at me. So other than
Well,
that, I'm great.
I noticed the final two words in your letter to the Sporting Post were Gregory Bortz.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can't get away from it.
Right. Greg, as you know, well, you haven't slept probably for 38 hours or whatever it is. We've got a lot of things happening. We've got a lot of balls in there, and we've got a lot of stuff that I'd like to talk about. And I want a big shout out for doing this because
It's,
I think it's needed, but it's not easy. And also, I want to thank Lance Benson because, Lance and I chat a lot, and I feel that perhaps Glistian is the right path or the right vehicle for you to just have a chat this morning. So, again, thank you. And we're going to touch on a lot of stuff this morning. It might be a long podcast for those guys watching, um, but in honor of the big race day today, I've decided to wear my Hong Kong hat. Only because I've never been given a Cape Racing hat, by the way. Um, we
well,
did
have you
try,
noticed
we did
they
try
cost
buy some when
money?
we were there for the Met. Listen, Greg, in three words, one word for each of the situations, I'm going to ask you a question. And just straight off the bat, how do you feel about South African horse racing in one word, past, present, and future?
Giving you three words, one for each of those.
Yep.
Past, memories. Present, hope. Future, exciting.
Cool. So now how do we get there? Because we're going to touch on what happened this week. Um, but how are we going to get there? How do we bury? Because I feel that horse racing is a little bit like music, right? When you get to the age of our age, we say that the bands were always better in our day, but that might not be the case, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not a buyer that racing was better in in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. And I'm a realist. I know we're never going to get 30,000 people per race meeting again. So how do we deal with that?
Well, yeah. I think the bigger challenge that we have, and the reason that you're even asking me the question, is look at your age and look at my age.
Yep.
And the issue that we have is that we have a very much an aging demographic. And big shout out to you and what you're trying to do through your syndications and what we're trying to do in the Cape through syndications. Is you're trying to regenerate and refresh the ownership base and the customer base. If we do that, Joe, they are not hung up on memories of the past and comparisons about back then. I think that's the only way we get past it. It is inevitable that your best stories are going to be about the Rothmans Durban July you attended in 19 something, and
Yeah.
same as me. Whereas our job is to create new memories for new people. I honestly believe that is the only way. As it relates to those people, which is the very bulk of our stakeholders who have a long history in racing, I would ask them to have a reality check. Where we are today is not where we were. There are fundamental structural changes why we can never get back there. At the time, in the glory days of horse racing, it was the only legalized form of betting. And probably cell phones didn't even exist, obviously. And it was a different time. On course attendance was the way you would both bet and view. There wasn't a TV channel. Now our lives are different. Everything is there in a YouTube clip or a live stream. That's one. And then the other thing, of course, is now there are other sources of entertainment that compete with horse racing in a way that never had before. That is fundamentally changed and is never going back. So if we are stuck in the way it used to be, I'm afraid to say that's an outdated mode of thinking. You've got to get with it. We are up against, we don't judge ourselves on success by having 30,000 people on course, right? We want to put on the best racing product we have, make sure that we have owners that are continuing to reinvest and buy horses, stay in the game. We want to get field sizes up to make the racing more attractive, whether you watch on a live stream or in person or on TV, so that we can get a regenerative customer base that stays in the game. That's our hope.
Yeah, and it's and you touched on on a few points which maybe some of us older people don't think about, but like racing is actually competing. I don't even think it's competing for the gambling rand. I think racing competes for time,
Yep.
leisure time. Yeah, that's why I see it anyway. And dare I say the word apartheid? But during apartheid, we didn't have our rugby teams touring all over the world.
Yep.
You know, we do a lot of work in rugby, Glistian. You know, there's no off season in rugby anymore.
Yeah, there's no off season. And by the way, you know how I know that what I'm saying is not a racing thing? Exactly to your point. If you go, I used to remember as a kid, there we go back to memories. I used to go down to Kingsmead to watch what was then Natal playing what have you, and it was packed. Natal played Transvaal, and there comes
Yep.
Clive Rice, and there are 25,000 people, and it's full. You go watch, if you go down to Newlands today, there's only going to be 100, 200, 300, 500,000 people there. Same story that we have if you come to a race meeting. That is the nature today because there's international sevens on from Hong Kong. There is this going on. You've got this happening on your phone.
Yeah.
You are competing. There are concerts. There are shows. I mean, literally, we had on our what was it? World Sports Betting Met Day. World Sports Betting Met Day that we had this year. There was a T20, the South African, the Betway T20 event. There was one in Paarl in the afternoon and one at Newlands in the evening, while we have the World Sports Betting Met in between. While there was a concert at the Greenpoint Stadium, there was a whole, and so all of a sudden, people say, well, hang on a second, look at your attendance. I'm like, well, I know where people are. I can point to them. They're all around the city, and that is.
And again, another reality check. Thanks to Dev and Heifer, I recently got myself a Hollywoodbets account to start entering the Punters Challenge. And the most entries I've ever seen for a free to enter competition where you can win R1 million is 17,000. So actually, we don't even have 30,000 people that are engaging, and this genuinely no criticism. This is more of an observation. There's no criticism of Hollywoodbets at all. Maybe they don't want me to put the numbers out there, but I found that number was quite interesting because the glory days, in inverted commas, have sailed. That's just, it is what it is. How do we now change what glory looks like? And that leads me on to product, right? It's got to be product.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do about the product that over the last 5 weeks has had little blips? What are we doing about this? How are we going to make this product improve? And what are you doing to make this product improve?
Well, I mean, there are tangible observations you can make. I mean, we came in 2 years ago, and I can only talk to what we've done, and I know it's improved. Whichever way you look at it, I know our physical facilities have improved. I know our field sizes in the Cape have gone up from here to here. It makes it a more exciting spectacle. We've got people back in the game. We've got owners buying again. I can tell you, if you were to, be attending in the Cape, and I've seen you a few times there. There is a palpable positive energy, and our product is much better. Definitely. I feel like we are, 40% away on our journey. We're just continuing doing the blocking and tackling. It sounds so cliche, but we're just doing the exact things that we've been doing. We need to get more horses and owners in the game. With that, that is the domino effect. I've said from all my things from when I came in a few years ago, is that there isn't a chicken and egg. There isn't. It starts off with people buying horses. Absolutely. That stimulates breeding. It stimulates this. Joe, if you're sitting and you live in the UK, when you put on your TV and you see a 3-horse race, 3 horses in a field, that's not entertaining, right? it's just, you know, even you will probably miss the trifecta in that race, but notwithstanding that.
Thank you, Greg. We've had a lot of well, listen, we're going to have to pivot now.
Yeah.
The reason we've had a few 3-horse fields in this country recently is through protest because of prize money, appearance money, and the trainers nominate horses and then pull them out. There's been quite a lot of that lately, you know. And I often find that comparing South Africa to other countries doesn't quite work because, you know, like even though we've got a similar population, 60 million, you know, we've got 3% unemployment. South Africa's got 37% unemployment. So your challenges as an operator are far greater than the challenges over here. Yeah. Absolutely, right? And if you put on a 3-horse race, that would be like, you'd be paying in, and your 3-horse race would be one of 8 races on the day, whereas a 3-horse race here is one of 38 races on the day. So I get that it's boring to watch and all that. And I understand why they do it over here. And I understand we've had races that you guys have cancelled there through lack of entries. And from an owner's perspective, of course, it's not good. But I think I've always tried to be racing first, owner second, from my perspective. So I understand why these things happen for the sport to survive. You guys, the operators, have got X amount of money in the pot, right? And you can't just be giving it away, even though I'd want you to give it away, but you can't, right? So
also, when you talk about punting, you know, you take an exotic bet, and if you've got a 3-horse field, okay, the maximum entries you can put in that race are 3, yeah, right? Whereas if you've got a 12-horse field, suddenly your perms become just
100%.
There's a commercial logic why you want bigger fields. It's both more entertaining, there's bigger betting turnover.
With our current horse population, do you think we try and have too many race days with our current racing population?
Yeah, I mean, just
do we try to do it? Is there we've got to put on this race meeting?
But Joe, I mean, if you've noticed, I've said consistently, and we've said consistently, that you need to cut your cloth according to your means. Our horse population is not big enough. This concept of racing 7 days a week is an absolute non-starter. You can't put it on. We've cut back on our number of meetings. So when we came in, just I want to let's be specific, right? We came in to the Cape. When we came in, we had, I'm thinking here, at the time, 59 meetings a year. Because of, I would say, reasonable success in getting our horse population up in the Cape, attracting horses to the Cape, et cetera, we've increased that to over 70 something. Okay, we had about 70, 71 meetings a year. So we've increased it. But we've also monitored the horse population in the other 2 provinces. And when the operators sat down and went through the program and the fixtures and what have you, I noted Gold Circle had increased a couple to 120 something, and 4 Racing had increased as well. They increased, and I said, guys, it makes no sense. Your horses have done this, and you've now increased your number of meetings. It's not sustainable, and it was obvious. I mean, Justin Vermaak was quite vocal about it and said it can't work. And what have you seen happen? Cancellations and cancellations. So there were too many schedules. You've got to be realistic. So that's why you're seeing Gold Circle come down now. It's come down from, we're in the hundreds now to forget cancellations for rain and other things. In terms of, it's down into the low 90s. And 4 Racing is cancelling meetings too. And that is going to be the norm now until foaling population goes up. And there's a long lead time, Joe, from when you go, people are putting more mares in foal. It's going to lead to it, but we've got to get down before we go up.
Isn't it amazing, right? That the people that call for the glory days to come back forget that there was only racing twice a week in the glory days.
Right, Wednesday, Saturday, right, Joe?
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Selective memory, eh?
Exactly. No, and that's it. Look,
we'll get there. We'll get there.
We will. I can tell you now, when you see the momentum, we obviously have a sales company. The last 2 sales we put on in January and March, just absolute record numbers.
I saw.
So when you asked me that question right at the very, very beginning for a word for past, present, future, that is what excites me. I'm seeing palpable energy, people wanting to get back to their glory days. So they're buying more, people then breed more foals, more owners, more horses, more races, back to those
Better
days.
prize money, better pay
Exactly.
for the grooms, better pay for the jockeys, better pay for the trainers.
Exactly.
That's the path, right?
Yeah.
Greg, okay, so we've sort of touched on that. I want to talk about, so something happened this week, and I saw an interesting statement from you, and then I saw the other operator put out a statement saying that they're aligned with you. But they seemed, and I'm not criticizing them because they're not here to defend themselves. I'm going to talk from a selling the products perspective, and what I feel personally, this is a personal view, there's a lack of alignment. Okay. When do we, because I know where the money comes from. I've done a project, and I know that selling pictures really generates money. Okay. When are we going to get to a point where number one in a field in Cape Town, number one in a field in Joburg, and number one in the field in Durban are all drawn one? Like it's like a silly thing, but when can we present a unified? I get that we've got two operators with business models, right? But as a product, when do we get to a unified?
That's a question for Four Racing. Right at the very beginning, it was certainly it had been.
Does it need to get unified then? Do you feel that it needs?
Oh, I think it does. I think it should. This was, I mean, to me, I've got to tell you, when it was introduced at Gold Circle originally, and the same, let's call it the American style saddle class, number equals draw.
Absolutely.
Right? And it worked and it made sense. And when you had new people, particularly with us, we're trying to attract new people into the game. You don't want to say, no, you're getting confused. You might be number 6, but you're coming out of gate number 12. That's not logical to people. So we certainly looked at what Hollywoodbets and Gold Circle had introduced then. We followed suit and made sense. I spoke to Four Racing, and the response was no. Their customer base had said they totally against it. I don't know how many were polled and coming up with that answer, but nonetheless, that's their call.
I struggle with stuff like that, Greg, because and I believe that you've done that. Obviously, I do. But
Joe, not once.
I'm going to try and get them on, because I think irrespective of the business models, some things should just be standard. Like we've now got, and again, I understand why Justin did it, because I raced internationally. So I understand why you guys went to the class 4, class 3, class 2. But today's race card for a Hong Kong race meeting has got an MR76 as race 3 or race 4. Like, can we just not agree to get it? I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. I know which one I prefer, but that's irrelevant. We should just have the same thing, right? I think we should be aligned. At our basic level, I think we should be aligned.
Well, let me put it to you this way. It's not a question for me. We in the sense that we've come up with our views on saddle class, our view on we going with the class system, because at the end of the day, we are part of the international world. We won't want to be an outlier. We want to conform, not for the sake of conformity, because it's both logical and makes business sense. And when people are looking at our racing, they understand what they're seeing. So that's why we've done it, and you've seen that in the Cape, and now you're seeing it happen in Durban, and that's.
And what I find amazing is that the owners and the trainers and the jockeys, we're all accepted, right? Like it is just what it is. So it's not even as if it's like a big thing. So you have Gauteng trainers nominating horses in Durban in the class system. It's not a problem. And it might not even be a problem, but from a product perspective, if we're going to be, I often quote McDonald's, make the worst hamburgers in the world, but they consistently shit. I think we need consistency, and if we have a product that we're selling, the product should be uniformed.
It is, but it truly is a question for the
Yeah,
powers.
I will. No, I just wanted to touch on that, and I understand that you guys initiated it, and I wanted the viewers to hear the logic why you did it. I can see in your office there a little bit, and we're now going to touch on a very hot potato. So I don't see a red telephone there anyway. So can Greg Bortz once and for all tell us about the fact versus perception and tell the world, where is this hotline into V? Because I know there isn't one, but boy, do you get accused of this hotline into V Moodley story.
Well, if I get accused of it, I can tell you that I'm blissfully unaware, certainly for the past few years, because after my early foray into social media, and when I found I had no time for anything else other than responding to comments, and I took myself off it, I'm obviously blissfully unaware of what's going on. I do recall at the time there was a thing. It all started on social media. I gave a speech at a Cape Racing Awards dinner, or maybe it was an Equus Awards dinner, but it wasn't
awards. No, it was a great speech, a little bit divisive, but it was a great speach.
I spoke what I believe to be true.
You spoke what you felt,
not
what your speech writer wrote.
Yes, exactly. I said what I said. I stand by what I said, believe what I said, and it was certainly it certainly sparked debate. In the course of that debate, I read a lot that somehow it's Bortz Moodley, which I felt like was completely disrespectful to the CEO of the NHA, as if V is the CEO of the NHA that regulates the racing operators, of which Cape Racing is one. So that's number one. There is no alignment. There is no cabal. There is no partnership. What I found was very interesting, and I forget who it was, and now I'm off there, so I can't see, but I bet you, Joe, you would be able to pick up. There were comments made. Somebody wrote that Moodley, literally Moodley is going to be working for Bortz. Watch this space. They're doing something in betting together, and that's what. Okay, but now we are 3 years later. Okay, so at some point now you look back at those names and say these people that are so opinionated that state these allegations as if they're fact, which has now been thoroughly debunked. Now what's their argument? Because now they should in theory have lost the credibility, but they don't, because people on social media are like goldfish. Memory lasts 2 seconds. The fact that person X turned around and made these definitive statements and then got 10,000 likes, like absolutely, it's like mind-blowing to me, but nobody remembers that. So
you've got no choice but to have a regulator.
Let me go a step further. I mean, this is the bizarre thing. So I'm not on social media. It doesn't mean that Gina doesn't take a clip every once in a while, or someone at Cape Racing, look what was said. I don't remember who it was or whatever the comments are, right? One of them, somebody wrote, was Bortz should fire the NHA. I'm like, okay, let me first debunk that myth. There is a regulator. That regulator is appointed under the Act, okay? Under the Act, government appointed. It is our regulator. The same way SARS oversees tax collection in the country, the NHA is responsible for overseeing the sport of horse racing and more, but overseeing the sport of horse racing, okay? The operators, along with jockeys, trainers, others, fall under the auspices of the NHA. The NHA has a constitution, it has rules, it has an executive, it has a board, and it fulfills its mandate by executing on that constitution and those rules. We now meaning Cape Racing racing operator, are responsible to follow those rules, those guidelines, and we report up to and are overseen by our regulator. The only area where it's a little different for racing operators versus anybody else is that under the NHA rules, the budget of the NHA, and it's a bizarre concept, the budget of the NHA is funded by the racing operators. Okay? Crazy concept. Think about you as a taxpayer. You also fund the budget for SARS. Okay? Doesn't happen. This is the only sort of area where I feel you regulated, and the one group of persons that are regulated are responsible to fund the body that's regulating. Nonetheless, it is a legal requirement that we do so, not a choice. So I've also saw comments, people have said, tell them what to do. What? I have no insight, input whatsoever into what the NHA does. We are required to fund once a year the operators. So we have no privileges as a result of that. I've made a comment at the time of that, the speech that we were referring to, that I have insight into the spending that is done, because part of the process of funding, we get the budget presented to us once a year. We have to fund the budget, but we at least see where the budget is. So I can see how much of the money is allocated towards testing, for example. And at a time when we were talking about integrity in sport, I was saying that that line, I felt more could be allocated to that important bucket ensuring integrity. I could neither instruct, compel, even, I mean, I guess all of us could request, but beyond that, I have no additional powers than Joe DeMotta has with regards to the NHA, right?
And
so
I attended the first time in my life the AGM this year.
I was not there, yeah.
And I can highly recommend anyone in racing that makes comments to do that and watch how that forum works and how V gets grilled. I'm not defending, V and I, we're good. But he got grilled in that thing, overspend. So
so V and I speak all the time, because when you say overspend, then the invoice for the overspend comes to the racing operators to fund, right?
And it needs to be a justification.
Yeah, so that is sort of the tenuous aspect of the relationship. But what I do want to say, when the Bortz Moodley thing, let me just to go one step further. The part that never ceases to amaze me is that at the end of the day, like him or hate him, the NHA is the regulator. They have to make the tough decisions, right? And you've heard the expression, no one likes a traffic cop, meaning they are on a hiding to nothing no matter what. No matter what, they're on a hiding to nothing, okay? If they do something, it doesn't get applauded if it was the right thing, but if somebody doesn't like it, it's always, they destroy it, right? What amazes me about V, what I admire greatly about V, is how brave he is in the face of that. Whether you agree with him or disagree with him, I just know I wouldn't want to be him. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, having to make the calls that he has to make. Whether you agree with him or not, he's on a hiding to nothing, whether he gets it right or whether he gets it wrong. And I'll go a step further than that. And here's the part where, Joe, I think people like yourself, I think, have a responsibility in this regard. I don't know what you say or don't say. So I'm not saying you haven't fulfilled your responsibility. I'm saying where you have a responsibility is this. The NHA does not respond to comments. They are the regulator. The same way if you were to go and make a comment about SARS, SARS is not going to put out a press release responding to what it is you said, right? So when there is a forum going on in social media somewhere berating the NHA, you're only getting one side of it, because they will never speak up for themselves, because they cannot. They are the regulator. They take action. If they need to put out a press release explaining the action, they do, but that is the end of their communication on the matter. So they are on a hiding to nothing. I can tell you, I've had times where the NHA has taken action that I didn't agree with. I'd pick up the phone and I'd speak to V. I say, V, I don't think this was right. And he would explain to me why they made that call. And I would say to you, 8 times out of 10, my reaction has been, I didn't think of that. I never saw it from that angle. Fair point. Okay, yeah, I actually think you're right. Or I don't think you're right, but at least I understand the logic. And unfortunately, if V had the platform to go out and explain their thinking, yes, you still may get 75% of the people, but So all I'm going to say on that front is the concept of us being aligned is crazy. The NHA is my regulator. I have an enormous regard for V. Moodley. I have enormous regard for the institution that is the NHA. I absolutely believe that there are always things they can do better. Or often they get stuff wrong, but I got you to know they don't get more wrong than I get wrong. Like we all make those things. Unfortunately, they never get to defend themselves. And so I think, if I can, sorry, Joe, I know
No.
if I can, I'm on a little rant here. So if you let me, yeah. No, just on that thing. The part that I find the most bizarre thing of all, and you and I actually had a conversation, I don't know when it was, about this. I hear comments about the corrupt NHA and the corrupt V. Moodley. I just want to be clear about something. That is the most small-minded thinking I've ever heard. Because to me, corruption implies putting money in your pocket. That to me, what the word corruption means, there's a financial element to corruption, right? That concept is crazy. It is crazy, right? How on earth is calling so-and-so or scratching this or doing this or taking this decision or suspending this enriching the NHA or the executive of the NHA? People throw out these words like it's just, oh, they're all thugs, corrupt. And I'm like, I sit there and I'm like, it saddens me to see that, because it takes it into the gutter when it isn't the case. The regulator made a decision. They might get it right, they may get it wrong, but that is the decision. And it automatically comes out in, corruption. It is like bizarre. What corruption? What corruption? It angers me.
Obviously, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, and we're going to carry on talking about the regulator. But I'm just, for those guys watching, we've all read how you really wanted Wednesday's race meeting to carry on.
Yep.
Okay. So you could have just picked up the phone then. If you could just pick up the phone, surely you would have just picked up the phone and said to the regulator, hey, Grant can ride till the end of the meeting because that's more important. You would have done that, right? If you had the ability to pick up the phone, you would have evoked that.
Yeah. And this was this is an NHA's call.
Which affected you.
Yes. And one thing is, I respect calls, and I expect everybody needs to respect the rule of the regulator. That does not mean in the appropriate time and in the appropriate forum, you cannot question, ask for explanations, but the way to deal with it is not the way that it was dealt with, right? I didn't want the meeting to be canceled, even though I ultimately had no choice but to cancel the meeting. But it would have been far more financially expedient if Grant wasn't suspended immediately or wasn't made to step off his rides. It would have been more financially expedient. I completely understand why the NHA made the call it did. I completely respect that call, and I don't agree and don't respect the decision that was made by the jockeys to strike at that point.
Yes.
Because
now, I want to bury the corruption bollocks once and for all.
Yeah.
Because if there's corruption, you and your team, who I've dealt with, if there's corruption, so there is no corruption. I don't believe there's corruption, but let's just pander to that theory, right? Justin comes running up to you and says, hey, listen, if this meeting is cancelled, we lose $500,000. You pick up the phone and you say, listen, V, I'm sending you 200, revoke the decision. Do you know what I mean? If there is corruption, that was the perfect scenario for you to evoke the freaking corruption, because so many people lost out on that meeting not going ahead.
And not only, and maybe for the listeners of this podcast that don't understand, you mentioned right at the beginning of it how important broadcast is, right? So we sell our picture internationally. When you sell your picture internationally, just so people know, you don't get a fixed amount for the season. Right. You get a price per race meeting. So tell me what happens if a meeting gets cancelled after race 3. Okay, it's not even prorated. It's not like you get 1/3 of the fee. You get zilch. Okay, It's the key line.
Sorry, because I know a little bit about that. Sorry to interrupt you, but let's just teach the world, if you can, answer the question without compromising your business. Is the deal done on a per race or turnover on race?
Per race.
Okay, so you guys have structured a deal that every time one of our races is shown, we get a fixed amount back into South African racing.
Correct. We literally sell the broadcast on a per race meeting basis. Race meeting basis. Okay. So if a race meeting gets abandoned because of rain, okay, after race 2, we get nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got to get to a minimum number of races on the day for it to count as a race meeting, right? So when a meeting gets cancelled, in this case because of the action that took place at the time, we lose out on a very big number.
I understand. Where I was coming from is, had you been on a turnover basis, that would lend itself more into the product being uniformed, because the international bettors, the punters internationally, would tend to bet more on product that they understand. And I know this is me interviewing you, but just for those people watching out there, I'm quite versed in this because I worked in racing television for a long time. And if you go onto a website like Bet365, for example, there's literally a race every minute from all over the world. And for them to show that product, a lot of things have to happen. We have to have quality of pictures. We have to have competitive racing. And we have to have integrity in our product. Otherwise,
absolutely.
Otherwise, the people don't punt on it.
By the way, if you look at, Joe, you probably study all this stuff, but there is a website in the US called the Paulick Report, Paulick.
I know it.
Right? And they are one of the main racing websites in the US. Okay. After those statements were made by Grant after that race, okay, go pull it up. There was all things about the lack of integrity in South African racing alleged by the jockey. The fallout was immediate. The fallout was immediate for those comments.
Correct.
You know?
Correct.
And what the upsetting part is that we've got a business, racing, an industry that's a money loser. Okay. Yeah. And the generosity of an Owen Heifer and a Mary Slack is keeping the racing industry alive. When things are done, whether deliberate or inadvertent, that hurt the industry, it just increases the loss, and then increases the reliance on one or two people to put their hands in the pocket to keep it alive so we can sit at home and watch racing and get enjoyment out of it. And it's like people don't realize that, and that entitlement that we are entitled to racing 7 days a week or whatever. You're not entitled to anything. It's a money-losing business. It has no existential right to exist. All right, it's being done by the benevolence of a few, and thus it needs to be treated with kid gloves. Because of that, it is on such a tender hook that you've got to treat it that way. You know?
Again, Glistian works in rugby, golf, and racing, really. And in golf, a few years ago, we had a massive earthquake and caused tremendous division until everybody sort of sat down and said, right, the future is collaboration and working together. And even Uncle Rory had to sort of reset, because nothing ever stays the same, right?
And can you imagine if we never had the small punter?
No, right? Unimaginable.
Unimaginable. But let me put it to you this way. So this is me, and I don't punt, right? I don't punt. If you never had the small punter or these racing fans that were so loving of the game, why would I want to buy a horse? There's no one to cheer it on. There's nothing. It's like, you know, it's like playing cricket in your backyard. There's no one there to celebrate you getting a century. You know?
I think South African racing, as you know, I've got horses in South Africa. I used to have horses here in England, etc. South African racing genuinely offers something a little bit like Australia, but more. the same colors that ran in the Derby in 1976 are still running in the Derby today in England. It's the same colors. Okay. And in South Africa, you have a Lighty, refugee from Mozambique, grew up poor in Regent's Park, used to walk to Turfentine Racecourse, used to look up and held up the trophy for the Garden Province a year ago. South African racing is still something you can dream of achieving. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can still come from anywhere, from Phoenix, from Tongaat, from Rietfontein. I'm just throwing out names.
Yeah.
And you can still compete. And that's why this is such a great sport. And if we can bring people in, there is no greater sport. It is so like golf, you know.
And you know your Glistian syndicates that you do, right?
Yeah, the challenge, it's
I
hard.
know it's a
There's not
challenge.
people. There's not enough people.
It's
And
not,
we
yeah,
don't get a rebate from or assistance from the freaking operators.
But here's the part. You sell a share to somebody and he puts in $5,000 and he's got it. Do you put in your language of your contracts that says you are only allowed to get 2% of the enjoyment because that you only own 2% of the horse?
No, they get 100%.
It's so exponential.
100%. But
brilliant.
So we always compare to Hong Kong, etc., etc. You've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Hong Kong. I've got an issue, and communication's a big thing, I think. So you said earlier, like V doesn't have, they've only got inbound traffic. They don't have an outbound communication. Yeah. And when they do have an outbound communication, it's a very PR, it's a very fact-based thing. Now, I live in England, and I learned about PR agencies, right? So let's go with Robbie Williams. Hello, Robbie. If you're watching, Robbie gets found in a swimming pool with whatever, and immediately his PR agency goes to work to mitigate this catastrophe that's happened. But that's not all they do. His PR agency are constantly communicating about his charity work, etc., etc., etc. Now, if anybody ever has the chance to go to Hong Kong, you will learn that the biggest contributor to charity in Hong Kong is the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And they are not shy in communicating this. Everything that's happened since you took over, etc., etc., I personally feel there isn't sufficient communication. And I think we should be more proactive in winning the hearts and minds of, and I don't mean you, Greg Bortz, I mean some entity should be more proactive in winning the hearts and minds of, hey, there's corruption in racing, or the tractor, the guy who drives the tractor was paid to not start the tractor because it's mental, some of the stuff that comes out. So can't we do that? Why can't we do that? Why do we focus on tips and this horse looks well and whatever, when I think we should be talking about all the good in racing?
That's a good point. I feel like we do an amazing amount of good.
We do.
Most of the good that we do is not something which is necessarily newsworthy, in the sense that you would turn around right now, Joe, and you would say, if I said to you that we have about, I'm going to guess, certainly direct in our employ, we have X hundred people, but then in terms of the broader ecosystem,
yes,
farriers, grooms, etc., like, as it goes on, there could be as much as another 10, 12, 14,000 people. The obvious good is this. I said it earlier, that racing is a loss-making industry, a loss-making business. Our plan is it's being kept alive by way of generosity of a few. Yes. The intent is to come up with non-racing revenue means to fund the racing losses. But the ultimate thing that we're doing, if you were to do a PR, it would be all these many thousands of people have employment today, thanks to racing being kept alive by those, and it's not newsworthy, but that is factually accurate, and that's a key point.
You say that it's not newsworthy, but if I go for a dim sum in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
There's a placard on the wall saying this fountain was funded by the Hong Kong Jockey Club. And I think that's how subconsciously we communicate to the nation. And even without syndication and all of these things, that's how we make ourselves, I think, a sport that's in people's minds that we did something. That's where I'm coming. I'm coming from a.
Yeah. You're coming from a good place. I can see it.
I think we should, like, so in our little syndicate, like we communicate as much as possible. But I've got a guy who bought a share in a horse with me, and he phoned me up the one day and he said to me, "This trainer doesn't communicate." And I was like, "Hold on a second. You've come into my business, right? I'm a non-profit, and I'm here to educate you. And the trainers that I deal with, I'm telling you to speak to the trainer directly. Learn about this game, right? Engage." And I've got a group with a horse that we syndicated with maybe 80 or 90 people. And in that little ecosystem, Greg, there's some crazy comments, right? But people teach each other, and it all comes through communication. So I think the future of South African racing needs to be in print media. And I know these things cost money, but I think we need to just tell the country about this amazing sport somewhere. And then when we have the blips, it's like, oh, okay, well, do you know what? We've done 18 good things this week. This thing's gone wrong, you know? And the perception is there's always something wrong. And we know that that's not the case.
Yeah.
We know that that's not the case. So if
we look, I can tell you this. So from a personal perspective, I've spent time with Minister Gayton McKenzie, and I've said to him, as the Minister of Sport, and I said, so tell me where horse racing is in your portfolio. He says it isn't. So I said, whose portfolio is it in? There's no one's, right? Yes, as the Minister of Agriculture as it relates to export of horses, but it's in, in the vaccines. It's not, I didn't even know about it. So I spent time with him. I said, listen, it's the craziest concept. We are one of the biggest employers in South Africa.
Yeah.
We're kept alive by the generosity of very few people. And with that, we are keeping thousands of people in their jobs. Please find it in your budget allocation to allocate a few $100 million towards horse racing every year so that we can continue to grow and ensure continued employment and expand employment. Okay? We missed out this year's budget, right? Not happening. Not going to stop, going to keep going.
I'm on a WhatsApp group with him, by the way, with Gayton. So I didn't know that you were doing this. I mean, I think that's a great shout, Greg. I think that's a great shout.
But have failed so far. Definitely not getting. He gets pinged from me a fair amount, and I'm not going to stop in that regard. So we don't get any government support. I just want to say, when you gave your Hong Kong example, Hong Kong, as you know, has the monopoly with betting in Hong Kong. So they make a lot of money, and they use that money for these positive causes that you've mentioned, as well as for their sport. We lose money, so we got to put private money in to fund those losses to keep people employed. That to me is the story. You've probably, every one of your listeners or viewers and people there are probably sick of me saying the same thing over and over and over again, but I keep making this point. And this morning when I spoke to a few of the jockeys today, I was going like, guys, you've got to understand something it's a little different to a conventional employment situation. If there was this company that was making money and you worked on the factory floor and you said it's not fair that the big wigs are taking these huge bonuses and we doing the key work and we just getting this, and you wanted to object because you didn't feel there was a fair distribution, I get it. But think about a situation where the company loses money. Any sane person coming in would shut it down and you wouldn't have anything. And now somebody's coming in to say, okay, we're going to put money in so you can ride, so you can work in the car park, so you can work in maintenance, right? So now it's a different scenario because it's not actually a business that is entitled to exist on the basis of conventional business wisdom. It's a business that's existing because, you know what, we're kind of lucky. The people that are doing it are sick for the sport the way everybody else is, and it now becomes a passion project. But it's
And
not
as sick. And I want you to tell the story.
Yeah.
So, and not as sick as what the majority of people would be for meatballs and pizza, right? And the reality is, even though there were more people sick for meatballs and pizza, tell the story.
Just to there's no context for your
It's not. They'll get to it. They know.
The very first, as you know, Joe, my background is buying bankrupt companies or troubled companies and trying to fix them. Got it right sometimes, got it wrong, didn't get it right some other times. The very first one that I bought had frozen pizza and frozen meatballs. Okay, selling them into supermarkets. This is in North America, in America.
Popular.
Yeah, popular, very popular brands as well. But the business was badly run. So even though that the customers loved the product, the business was losing money hand over fist. Bad accounting system, lots wrong with it, okay? And so went in there, and in terms of being able to fix it, the thing that was clear is a business doesn't have a right to exist just because it's popular. Because the product is liked doesn't mean it has a right to exist. It's got to justify its ability to exist by actually turning a profit in the business world. If we couldn't find a way to fix it, even though it would be a loss to the thousands of people that loved its product, it would have to close its doors and the product would go. It had to find a way to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Thankfully, in that one, we were able to, and we did. Take that example to horse racing. As I sit here now, there is no discernible way to take the sport of horse racing with its costs. You've got to pay stakes, we've got to pay all these expenses, and whatever, and take into account broadcast revenue, which offsets, and takes into account a little bit of gaming revenue, which offsets. It's not fixable, okay? Unless we find money from outside. As of now, that money from outside is, in essence, a donation, okay? In time. Of a few entities, exactly. So that's what we're doing there now. So that changes the dynamic. It changes the dynamic. So when trainers, for example, will turn around and will come and complain about something, we need better floodlights at Milnerton. It's very dark in the morning. We want to start training early. And then you say, okay, that's a good point, reasonable thing. Floodlights, 12 million rand. All right, we'll take it out of profits. Oops, it doesn't work that way. It's like, okay, I understand what you want. I understand why you want it. We don't have the money to do it. Then you go cap in hand and say, please, sir, please, can I? So there isn't an existential right to exist. It changes the dynamic. And that was my point when I spoke to the guys in the jockey room, which is, guys, we're in a fragile ecosystem here. We're fragile. If you're going to strike, what it's going to do is right away, X 100,000 has come out of the pocket of the racing operator because the broadcast is cancelled. We've already had to pay for our expenses for the day to get people on security, the NHA, all the various components of a cost of putting on a
meeting. You're not anti V's decision. You're not anti the strike decision, but the consequences are articulated, and in this ecosystem, these things don't work.
Exactly. And so what I said to them, what I said to the guys was, and I believe there's genuine remorse from the jockeys based on the discussions that I've had, that passions ran high, and with the benefit of hindsight, you know, because all I said was, you guys have the right to voice your displeasure. You have the right to object. You have the right not to work. You have the right to do all these things. Guys, I'm asking you one favor. Suspend that right by 2 or 3 hours, because the damage that you will inadvertently do to the sport and our industry and our reputation, because you want to show how angry you are, okay, is not worth it, particularly in the context of this fragile ecosystem. Yeah. And it is that was my objection. If they, at the end of the day, had decided that they're now at the end of the race meeting, we are not riding again until we've had then at least we will not be incurring costs. We will not be incurring international embarrassment. We will not be incurring all these things that could have a negative impact on our business, which would require more money to be infused. Okay. So people were to turn around and say, hang on a second, Greg. But then if you're not having racing, you're not making money. No, guys, if you're not having racing, we're saving money. We lose money every time we put on a horse race. People need to understand that, right? So now when we don't put on a horse race, people say, well, how can you cancel meetings? Guys, you've just cost us money there. We've canceled a meeting. We are now going to recoup that money because we're not paying stakes, NHA, security, casual labor, etc.
Is that the motive for cancelling the upcoming meetings?
No, the motive for cancelling, it wasn't to recoup the money.
Okay.
The motive for cancelling the upcoming meeting was the following. The cancellation that took place at that time in the middle of a race meeting was damaging in multiple respects. It was damaging not just economically on the day because we had incurred the costs and now we can't get the revenue to offset part of the costs. That was now lost. But reputationally, it was huge. There were examples of people having bought horses at our sale right away, said, we don't want it, take it back, resell it. Okay, can't, but I'm just saying there was that. Got calls from multiple sources of our product overseas expressing concern. So there was enormous reputational damage. We are not going to go and risk that happening again. Okay, so while emotions are high, okay, and until jockeys as a collective, that we have assurance that a race meeting that starts is going to finish, absent for safety reasons or weather reasons, right? Not ready. So time out, cool down. Not a long time. Where are we on? The 29th of March. We've cancelled the 2nd and the 6th, right? It's 1 week. And at the same time, there will be a slight recoupment of that money because we're not incurring the cost of putting on those meetings. And I think, you know, but the pain is suffered then by jockeys, it is suffered by grooms, it is suffered by trainers. Owners are still paying training fees without having the ability to earn back money. So it is not a decision that was made lightly, but in light of the action, there are consequences for that action. That is the consequence for that action. And it is a very...
So I hear you. Do you think, let me word this correctly, do you think that too many of the participants are suffering because of the decision to cancel the meetings?
You're going beyond jockeys now. You're talking about all the other, there is no question there's collateral damage. Yeah. There's no question. There's no question. But you have to, you cannot engage in that behavior without there being consequences. Otherwise, there's no disincentive to prevent one from engaging in that behavior again. There has to be a consequence for that action. Tell me, Joe, what is the consequence for that action?
Well, I agree that there's always got to be consequences. And as Winston Churchill said, you don't negotiate with the tiger when you got your head stuck in its mouth. I get that. I understand all of that. And I read your letter, and for what a lot of people on social media might say about you, I can only say a few things on the times that we've met. And I actually know I think I know what aggravated you the most. I hope I'm right, but it was the two jockeys drinking with a trainer. I think that was a stab to the heart or to the back, maybe, probably to the heart more than to the back, because
those jockeys have now said to me, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
Now they've realized, but that wasn't, by the way, that wasn't it at all. The decision had already been made.
I know the decision had been made. I'm talking about the hurt and the.
Oh my God! No, that was look. There is a. I'm a firm believer, Joe, in there's a right and a wrong.
Yeah.
Like to me, having respect and integrity is non-negotiable. Without mentioning any jockeys' names.
No.
There was a particular race day where it was a long race day, and certain jockey booked off for the last two rides. You know, maybe it was a 12 race card or whatever it was one of those long days for medical reasons, which obviously in that time there weren't any more jockeys left on course, so a horse had to be scratched, etc., etc., etc. Okay, medical reasons. But then said jockey, miraculous recovery, drinking and enjoying themselves in the after party of a particular race day, right?
The optics aren't good.
It's just poor form, right? It is disrespectful. If you are so So as a result of that, now the new regulation that we are going to put it on our course is if you book off not well to ride, you must leave the facility. Either go to the medical facility or leave the facility. You can't. No, I mean, Joe, there is. I mean, bad behavior.
But Greg, I'm going to defend. Okay, I'm very close to a certain jockey. Well, I know them all. I mean, yeah, but there was a race meeting where it was unbearably hot and unbearably unbearable in the jockey room, for example. And in a 12 race program, I know that he didn't feel well.
Okay, but let's not get off.
Let's not be specific, but what I'm saying is there's always three sides to a story, right? But I get that the optics don't look good.
By the way, it used to be rules that if a jockey ever gets stood down, the jockey then needs to leave the race course. In this particular case that you're referring to, the jockeys after race 3 determined that they were no longer willing to ride in light of what happened to grant suspension. At that point, if you're going to make the call to strike and not ride, don't think you can shower, get dressed, and then go sit in the members' lounge and have a drink. I'm sorry, Joe. There's not two sides. There's not three sides to this story. There just isn't. But that jockey, just so you know, the name's irrelevant. The apology has been forthcoming, and the matter is resolved and done.
Yeah, that's another thing I can say to the viewers about Greg Bortz is that post apology, if one needs to be dished out, it's over.
Done. It's over. It's over. And I do want to say this, and this is. You have close relationships with a lot of the jockeys. I mean, I can tell you.
I'm a Group 1 winning owner, Greg. So
that's true. That's true. You are. I can tell you, you have a good relationship with Andrew Fortune, who I think is one of the characters of our sport. And my letter, as you would have seen, was addressed to Aldo and Cornet, the two jockeys who are head of the Coastal Jockeys Association. It's really addressed to all jockeys, but it's got to be addressed to them by virtue of their thing, which means there's disproportionate spotlight shining on Aldo and Cornet because their names were mentioned. It's not meant to be, but I can't address it to every jockey. It's got to be addressed to the association. I've spent enormous amount of time on the phone, enormous amount, and meeting with Aldo and Cornet, for example, discussing the situation. I have spent nothing else other than on this jockey situation. Andrew sent me a message to say, so bearing in mind, his son is now in the spotlight because his name appears in a letter, said to me, I mean, I'm not going to look for it now, but something along the lines of, you're a good man. And that meant an enormous amount to me because he knows he's not sitting there saying, so when on the social media, whatever's going on, what people don't realize is we do whatever we can to assist the jockeys. The jockeys and Cape Racing, for example, are both regulated by the NHA. So we have the same regulator. But whatever we can do to assist the jockeys, we do. And so I have an unbelievable relationship with them. But I had to take this call at some point. What's the point of being in a leadership position if you're not going to lead? Don't bury your head in the sand. We took the action that we felt was appropriate. Some may agree, some may not agree, but that is the price one pays for having to make those calls. And I now, with the benefit of hindsight, Joe, I honestly believe if I can go back again and do it again, cancelling the race meeting, cancel the second, cancel the sixth was the appropriate call. I stand by.
Okay. So, we're nearly done, Greg. I spoke to you a couple of days ago. So I don't want to talk about whether things are right or wrong, whether I agree with the rules or don't agree with the rules, whatever they are. I told you how I felt first and foremost when I saw this whole thing unfold. And again, I've spoken about the lack of communication, in my opinion. I also feel that there's a lack of support. So for me, right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever, I saw a broken young man almost at the end of his tether, almost breaking down in tears, crying for help. Okay. And not me, of course, no names mentioned, but I feel sometimes I look at the only way that a guy can communicate against a fine that he's been given or a suspension that he's been given.
Yeah.
Is the only way he can do that is through litigation. And I went to the AGM, litigation costs have gone through the roof, right?
Oh, yes.
And I think maybe we should also have, I don't know how, I've got suggestions, but maybe not all the solutions, right? But I think I think we need to have a way of working through these things, supporting each other, so that it doesn't get to a situation like that.
Yeah. So let me just say, as soon as this happened, the night it happened, the same night it happened, I had already reached out to Grant, Aldo Cornet, and uh, uh, chatted to the guys. I think Grant will be great. He will be. At the end of the day, I think he made a mistake. There will be a cost to making that mistake. I think he feels no doubt that if he had a chance to do it over, he may have done it somewhat differently. I think he feels on a positive side, his mates stood by his side. I think that's made him feel good in that regard. However, having spoken to almost all the jockeys now, I think they know that notwithstanding that they stood by somebody for the right reason, it was the wrong call. I think there's been a lot of learning from it.
Yeah,
I believe that there will be improvements from it.
brilliant.
I believe that my relationship on a personal level with the jockeys, if anything, has been strengthened, not hurt by it. I know that may not how it seems in the court of public opinion, but I am very empathetic and sympathetic to what the jockeys go through. I do think there's a lot of what they do is self-inflicted, and they need to learn from it. And I think they are, and they will. There are a few things in my discussions today with the guys. My suggestion to them was, certainly as it relates to the Jockeys Association, I think it would be helpful to them if there was a non-jockey, albeit an ex-jockey or something like that, that ran that on their behalf.
I've
So
had this
that,
conversation
I
with
mean,
them before.
yeah, that had a relationship before. At least then there's a step removed. They do need an advocate. I would welcome them to have a strong, knowledgeable advocate that represents them, that can be keeping an eye on the very things that you just mentioned, including mental health. And so that's really important. But I do want the jockeys, as we spoke about the meatballs and pizza story, I do want them to understand that where they plug in that ecosystem, it's a very fragile ecosystem in light of the economic realities of it, and they've got to take that into account. Now, that said, if they have grievances, which they appear to have with the NHA on matters to do with fines or penalties or whatever the case may be, it is absolutely appropriate that they seek to get that addressed. Okay?
Yeah.
There are ways to get that addressed. Jockeys, in theory, are represented in certain committees that discuss rules and what have you. But so far, there haven't been anybody attending those meetings, for example, right? However, if there were to be a person that advocates for them, that ran their association, that could sit on that same rules committee as myself or whoever else is on that rules committee, that will be helpful. So they need to have that advocacy. But I also said to them, I'm very much there to try and help and assist. As we cleared up, I do not have that red hotline, the direct line to say, hey, change this or fix this. Far be it. I do believe that hopefully I've earned the respect of some, and thus when I speak, people may listen, even if they ignore what I request or say. And I'm certainly there when I see an injustice. I'm there to help fight the injustice. I can tell you, I had Aldo Cornet, I think it was Richard, a few others in my office, going back a year or 18 months, whatever it was, to do with the fines for crops. Okay. I did an analysis. I'm happy to send it to you if you want to share it, which I just went in the top, it could have been 10 racing jurisdictions around the world, to see where the South African crop penalties, not the fines, I'm sorry, at what point you were getting penalized were. If number one is the strictest in the world, and number 12 is the most lenient in the world. Like Hong Kong's the most lenient, no fines, right? No penalties at all, no, right? If that's 12 and the strictest is number 1, we were number 7. Okay, we were number 7, meaning literally we are on the more lenient side. So we are. That's where we are. I can send them all to you, pulled from all the international sources. So the only point that I said to the guys is this: start off by just saying to yourself is, we don't have the strictest things in the world. You've got to learn to count to 12. I understand that it's difficult in a race environment. No. But that is where your rule is. Okay. So now, is the issue the rule, or is the issue the fine for breaking the rule? And then we got into the story about, hang on a second, why do I get fined this much in a maiden, but this much in a high-paying bigger race, for example? And we can have intellectual debates about that, and these are valid debates, but there are forums and means in which to have those debates. I just said to the guys, this was not the way to do it. That's all.
Look, I personally don't think we should have a whip, personally, but that's my personal view.
Yep.
I live in England, where probably the most famous race in the world isn't now won by horses that were supposed to win the most famous race in the world, because we've made that race a different race. I'm talking about the Grand National. And I get that the optics sometimes don't look good when we unfortunately have to put a horse down. But I actually went to the NHA website last night and I looked at deaths of horses last year, because they have to be recorded. And actually, it's not that much. It's sad, absolutely. But actually, we don't communicate about the amazing life that they have, how they get looked after and all these things. And feel that with a whip, it's the same thing. I think it's crept in all over the world. This is my personal opinion. And we're trying to make the optics look good, but the people that will come into racing and get educated in racing won't have a problem with it, if that makes sense. You know? But the rules are there. The rules are there. And you should abide by the rules. I wrote an email to V. Moodley, and I always get a reply from the man. He's fantastic. I said, do away with the fines. Give them community service. That's what I suggested. Okay? Make them go to the academy and spend 5 days at the academy with the youngsters. Make them go to work in the mornings. I suggested all of this. Instead of, let's talk about Grant, right? Who's an exceptional rider. Instead of fining him 50 grand, divide that into time and make him go to work every morning for 7 weeks, not ride work, but teach young people what to do. Let's something good come out of it. That's what I wrote to V, and that's how I personally would deal with it. Of course, there's different opinions, etc., etc.
That's constructive, Joe. I like that.
I do think that taking 50 grand out of someone's pocket, or 100 grand or 10 grand or whatever, I don't personally feel that that's having the desired effect to stop this from happening. Okay. And I don't think that any good comes out of it, if that makes sense. Right?
So I do believe, so great points. I do believe that there is a way constructively, positively, to have that discussion and debate. I absolutely believe, handled the right way, there will be ears available to listen. Whether or not the desired change would ultimately result, no one can say. But I believe that the way you just went about it with the letter, but from a jockey's perspective, on a more formal basis, being assisted by some who can, whether it's help with the writing and helping or facilitating the thing, I believe there's an opportunity to engage in constructive dialogue that can get. I
really do. I think, again, I don't want to be too offensive to anyone, but I do think we've got an 80-20 split at the moment. We've got 20% really, really outstanding jockeys, and we've got 80% that could do with a little bit of improvement. And I think one of the reasons is we've got a fantastic academy, but 35 years ago, a youngster from the academy was riding work with Jeffrey Lloyd. Today, a youngster cannot ride work with Richard Fourie because Richard's flying all over the country. So instead of giving Richard a 15 grand fine, Richard, just picking on you, I love you. But instead of giving Richard a 15 grand fine, let's share the knowledge. That's my thing. Greg,
I think it's a great call, Joe.
we're going to knock it on the head. I've got one last thing, and I'm hoping that I'm going to catch you out here. Does ego ever come into it with you?
No. And I mean, I believe I've seen.
What about lot number 135?
No, that's called stupidity, Joe. I mean,
come on, Greg, 9 million rand. Have you got a trainer? Can I suggest a trainer?
Go on.
A killer.
No, don't. Yes, I do have a trainer. I do have a trainer.
You do have
no, well, let me say the following.
Let's end on a laugh.
In that context, you are absolutely right. It did. It's something, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I'm messaging.
Yeah, I think you're right. But listen, so here's how, whether it's ego or whether the fact that I'm absolutely love struck, Gina went through the entire catalog and she made the crazy comment of saying, there's only one lot I like.
Baby.
So, I mean, you know the story how I met Gina. Like and that was buying a horse called Gilded Gina at an early date. And I figured out in life, you're meant to be improving, learning, moving forward. And I clearly never learned one damn thing. And now I went and bought her a horse again. This time, anyway, you're right. I take it back. Ego clearly came into there. I would severely hope, without getting too serious, as it relates to matters of Cape racing or in time Gold Circle and what have you, that ego doesn't enter into any aspect of decision making, and I don't think it does, and I'll tell you why. Because the most humble, modest person that I've ever met in my life is a gentleman by the name of Owen Heffer, and if I were to go and ever let ego creep into any decision making,
it puts you in your place.
It put me in my place within milliseconds.
Do you report to him?
No, we chat regularly. No, there's no reporting. There's no reporting, but that does not mean I certainly don't report to Owen. But that doesn't mean if I don't screw up, he doesn't let me know about it in his mind. You know what I'm saying? And
Gregory Bortz,
yes,
thank you so much. It's been very long. We're going to split it into two. I hope we've alleviated and answered a lot of questions and concerns and whatever. Look forward to doing it again. And
anytime, Joe. Anytime.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.